Yeah, thank you for all those, and thank you for Chris for running that portion. Sometimes at APCM, there's so much going on in the life of the church. We felt this year it was a good to focus on this particular area rather than trying to cover everything that we do. And so we're going to begin now to look forward and to look ahead. And when you look around the life of the church, you see God at move in all sorts of ways. Even this Sunday, we had a young man, Lewis, get baptized. You can watch that. But his story was that he, on Christmas Eve, walked into our midnight service, never been in church before, but felt something drawing him and compelling him to step in. And when he came to our midnight service, he said he was overwhelmed. And that for him was the trigger to find Jesus, to pursue Jesus. And then this Sunday, he shared his testimony, got baptized. His buddies who were atheists or agnostics were all with him. And he wasn't invited. But he found a place of belonging and home, ever encountering Jesus. And looking back 5 years, that was our dream of this site. That was a dream of all of our congregations, is that people can be invited, but also we are a hub for our community where people can experience the love of God. And so we have seen that with people in our village walking in. We've seen that from people from Germany that have done 4 years of study that are finding a place of belonging to be encouraged. And so that's something that we can praise and thank God for. But in the last year, we've hosted quite a lot of diocesan meetings and gatherings where they've been looking forward. But the picture of Hazelmere Church is slightly different from the picture in the diocese. And in just a moment, we're going to show a short clip from Bishop Stephen, and it was the bishop's charge. I'm not going to charge anywhere tonight. And he's sharing a little bit about the state of our Church of England and the state of our diocese and what the priority for the diocese needs to be. And it's an interesting listen. So David, if we're ready, let's hand over to Bishop Stephen.
We need to face the reality that although we are engaging with tens of thousands of families through our schools, our engagement with children and young people through our parish churches is no longer as confident and strong. You'll have seen some of the statistics prepared in the paper for the Synod, which we'll debate this afternoon. Based on the 2022 statistics for mission and average weekly attendance, 42% of churches have fewer than 5 children aged under 16. 10% are working with 5 to 10 children, 8.7% between 10 and 20, and only 6.5% have a ministry with over 20 children and young people. In some of our urban deaneries, we are now engaging through our churches with only 0.3% of children and young people in our communities overall. We have seen a long, slow regathering of our adult congregations post-lockdown, thanks to the prayers and hard work of so many people, for which thanks be to God, and that is still continuing. But we know across the diocese that the regathering and restoring of our work with children and young people, let alone its growth, has been much, much slower. Yet we also know that the effects of the lockdown on children and young people themselves have been extremely serious, still emerging. Patterns of church and youth group attendance were broken over the 2 years people were not able to meet together. There's been a significant downward shift in the number of volunteer youth and children's ministers. Families have adopted different Sunday patterns. There are a whole host of reasons we can point to. This slower regrowth, where, though there are exceptions, seems to apply across every social setting in our diocese and across every tradition and every size of church. These figures should not lead us to despair. They're part of a wider picture, but they should be a spur to reset our youth and children's work with urgency as a vital part of our service to our communities and of sharing in God's mission to God's world. We want children and young people to come to know Jesus and love Jesus and follow Jesus. We want to make disciples in every generation. We want to bless families and young adults and see them access the immense treasure of the gospel.
That was part of a longer session he did actually. We were hosting that here at church. When you read his information and when you talk to other churches in the diocese and other leaders, and you can talk to Kat Aboud, who's one of our diocesan discipleship enablers. You've started that job in the last few months? September. Chat with her afterwards. Some of those figures are quite staggering, where just over 6.5% of churches in this diocese have more than 20 young people. And I think when we are looking at the statistics, we have around 150 under 18s in the life of this church. In fact, 25% of our church are under 18s. And so what are we going to do about that? It means that we're slightly abnormal, but you do that anyway. You don't need me to. I'm standing here. I can tell you that from miles away. I haven't even got my glasses on. But that's got me thinking in terms of what does that mean for us as Hazelmere Church? We've had a number of other churches coming to us recently saying, can you help advise on how you did building projects? We were able to help another church, Barbara Druitt, some of you will know her from the past. A small team has been over to her church as they're trying to relaunch family and children's ministry there, and she's doing an amazing job. And then they asked a small team of us, well, how do we shape a new type of church for the parents that are coming? So we were helping with them, and it feels like actually as Hazelmere Church, we're in a position to see God blessing us as a community. As Isaac has said, people are walking in, youth are walking in, but there's more to it. And so as I was praying and thinking about what we need to share, I want us to have 3 things that we're not going to do first. And then I'm going to present 4 things that we are going to do. So I had a little joke. I had this picture that I wanted to use tonight, and it's 3 don'ts. It's not them, but that I just thought it was a lovely photo, and I thought it might get a gag, which it did. The first thing that we're not going to do is this. We're not going to shrink back. We're not going to shrink back. I've been reading Hebrews chapter 10. It's the end of the book of Hebrews, and the writer describes for a number of verses the pressures and the challenges that church has faced. It said you had to have endurance, you've had to endure, you've had to have patience. And then at the end, the writer to the Hebrews is saying, in spite of all these challenges, how are we going to respond? And then this is what the writer says. And I thought we could read that to one another this evening. Actually, let's stand as we do that, because then you'll sit down. But this is after a whole season of challenges. This is what the writer to Hebrews says to this early church. Let's read it together. But we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith and are saved. Let's read that one more time. But we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith and are saved. You might want to sit down. We are never going to be a church that shrinks back. When COVID came, we weren't going to be a church that shrunk back. When we set a goal to have Trinity Centre, we weren't going to be a church that was going to shrink back. Hazelmere Church is not a church that sees challenges and says, oh, we'll shrink back. And when I looked at the Greek word for shrinking back, it literally means this: the timidity of one stealthily retreating. The timidity of one stealthily retreating. And some of you will have seen the Homer Simpson little meme of Homer Simpson walking back into a hedge. I downloaded it to play, but I thought that might break the flow. But have a look at it. Just search up Homer Simpson meme of him walking back into a hedge. The Greek word almost has that idea of someone seeing a challenge and then timidly, stealthily moving away. But the writer says that's not who we are. Hazelmere Church, we're a church of faith. We don't shrink back. That's the first one. We are not those who shrink back. Secondly, and I need to get on this. Hang on. Oh, I've just put this onto a harder setting. This isn't mine. Right. So, hang on. Right, here we go. Has anyone enjoyed cycling? Not around here. You'll know that I like to mountain bike. This isn't a mountain bike. This is Anna Montgomery's. You know that when you cycle around here, there's certain bits which are downhill, and there seems to be more uphill than downhill. And whenever you cycle around the Chilterns, you'll know there are times on your cycle ride where you're having to really hunker down. Your legs are burning. You're working up a sweat because you know this is a hard cycle ride. And so you're going for it. I can smell WD-40. You're going for it and you can feel the burn. Hazelmere Church, over the last 5 years, we've felt the burn at different points. We had to take steps of faith for Trinity Centre that pushed us to the limits of where we thought God would be. And just as we were thinking about that, COVID happened. And so we had to pivot and push through a season. When we came out of COVID, especially with our youth and ministry, it looked like we only had like 12 young people left. And so rather than saying, right, we're going to shrink back, no, we're going to push in. We're going to push in. We're going to push in because we need to see God's kingdom come. Flipping heck, I probably overdid it. However, after a season of doing that, we are beginning to see the fruitfulness of God in the life of our church. There's a growing momentum in our children's ministry. When you look at a number of our congregations, some of them, there's not room anymore. Flipping heck, I can't breathe. Hang on. So what do? You take your feet off the pedals. And when you do that around here, your momentum carries you. You take it easy. When we stop pedaling, the momentum will carry us. But what happens? You will, or we will, begin to slow down, decline, and shrink back. I'm going to get off this because... oh, there we go. I did it. In this season, we could rely on the momentum that God has been doing. But we can't afford to rely on our momentum. When we see what's going on within the Church of England and what God or how God has positioned us, now is a time to push into those areas and also to seek to be a blessing to others. And so we're not going to rely on momentum. And the last thing that we're not going to do is turn off the tap. Probably about 6 months a year ago, I did a little talk about blessed to be a blessing and how actually there's that overflow. Hang on, have I broken it? There we go. Sorry. It's always comical. I'll stop that in a moment. Oh, no, I won't stand there. That's terrible. I have set myself up with a statement that says we are not going to turn off the tap. All I want to do is turn off the tap at this moment. But we look that actually God's desire for us is to keep flowing and filling us so that out of us there will be streams of life-giving water. And we explore together that the moment we turn off the tap, it seems like that hinders the blessing that God wants to pour in. And so one of the phrases that we've used for years is blessed to be a blessing. And so we're not going to shrink back. We're not going to rely on the momentum in a way of what we've seen God do over the last couple of years. And we're not going to turn off the tap. But what are we going to do? What are the 4 areas that we're going to prioritize and look at doing? Some of these are practical and some of these are spiritual or prayerful. So let's have a look at just 4 areas and then we're going to have a chance to pray. The first area is this: we're going to play our part. I'm aware that across the life of our church, we already have, that's 143 volunteers. That's just with children and youth and vulnerable adults. That doesn't include all the other areas. But there's an imperative for all of us to play our part. I'm aware that there are pressure points and strain points in a whole load of our ministry areas. I'm going to pick on Steve Walters for a second. The other day I came to Manor Farm and he said, Mark, I've got a step in leading, but I'm also church warden for that day. And when I heard that, I thought, actually, probably it means that someone else might need to play a part. In fact, Chris, myself, and Fee, me and Chris as vicars, we're doing youth every week, as well as running alphas and all the other things, which is great, but it also means we don't necessarily have energy and capacity to do some of the other things that God is doing us to do, calling us to do. As a church, we are a body. And for a body to function well, we all have a part to play. And that will look different for all of you. For some of you, that will be preaching, leading. For some of you, that will be youth or children. For some of you, that will be in the cafe. For some of you, that will be baking cakes. For some of you, that will be on tech. For some of you, that will be praying at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning in the prayer studio every Tuesday. It will look different for every one of us, but every one of us has a part to play in our wider community, in our workplaces, but also this church family. And so rather than me thinking, or us thinking, well, here's a list of things, I want us to switch the way we think about that. And so I'm just going to ask, if you are on a leadership team, either of youth or a congregation, and let's include prime time as well, could you just stand up? So if you're on one of our leadership teams, these are people that are leading congregations or ministry areas or children or youth. What would be lovely for us to do is over the next 1 or 2 weeks or next month, approach some of these people, and rather than wait for them to say, we need a new warden, or we need a tech person, or we need this, I would love it if we switch our church culture, that when we see our leaders, we go to them and say, how can I help? How can I play my part? How can I be a blessing to you? So that we're not putting the onus and the weight on our leaders to do the asking. We are doing the offering. So as children and people, as part of this family, we are saying to others, how can I help? How can I play my part? And every congregational leader will have a list of how you could play your part. Every youth minister, every children's, they will know how you can play your part. If we start offering, we'll see a new vibrancy in life. Can you, if you'd love to sit down? We're all going to play our part. The next one I'm going to just do really briefly. The second area is we're going to participate in Gift Day. That's coming up. This one, it's kind of a low-key one. Last year we had to really smash it because it looked like we were having a massive deficit. But actually, you'll notice Trish has already said our faith goal is 50,000. We're assuming 50,000 in our Gift Day to meet the commitments of mission and ministry that we set out in our financial plan. If we don't get that, we'll just take it out of the reserves. But reserves won't last forever. And so I'd encourage us that whatever way we can, participate in our gift days. And when we say actually we need these finances to push forward, then I'd encourage you to pray and say, yeah, I'm going to participate in a way that God shows me or leads me. That's number 2. The third area is we're going to pray for our emerging generations. That's become the number one priority of the diocese, because the trend in the diocese is like not great, is it? Cat in terms of across. So, but we need to pray. And so we're in the process of actually saying, rather than having a team of interns and volunteers and basically one part-time families worker and one part-time youth worker, actually we need to recruit a higher level of hours to really put energy and effort into this ministry. And so we're going to look at having 3 roles: a youth minister, a youth outreach worker, and an assistant family outreach worker. And we're going to the diocese. We sent off a grant application yesterday, Jane, to the diocese to say, actually, could you help part fund this? But as a church, we want to say we need. It's great, the teams that we've got, but we actually need to put more emphasis and energy so that we can build on the potential that we are already seeing. And lastly, and this isn't necessarily emerging generations, we're going to pray and plan and prepare for the future of our church in Widmer End. And so I thought, just to finish the APCM and Vision evening tonight, I would map out where we are with our thinking and planning and preparation for Church of the Good Shepherd and our mission to Widmer End. That requires a whiteboard. And a pen. So I've been meeting with the leadership team at Church of the Good Shepherd for, over the last year, and we've been praying and seeking God for that congregation. A number of years ago, we embarked on Partnership for Missional Church, which was a sense of how can we partner with the community of Widmer End to see God's kingdom break out so that God's church would grow and people would come to know Jesus. That was beginning to grow and develop, and then COVID hit. And I think I shared this at the last APCM. Church of the Good Shepherd, in one sense, was the congregation that was sort of, or the mission was hit hardest for COVID. It was never the largest congregation anyway. And actually, the work and the momentum that was building, actually, it became a bit of a challenge. And so we've been praying and discerning, well, God, what are you doing? It's your church. What are you going to do? And so at the moment, I'm just going to draw a little timeline. We are, what are we, May, let's call it May 2024. Well, that's where we are now. Our next key marker is September 2024, and our next key marker will be September 2025. And so over this next year, I thought APCM, we're sharing where we believe God is leading. And then this next year, our desire and where we sense God is leading is to begin to form a team of people who have a heart and a sense of call of God on their lives to see a fresh expression of church be birthed in Widmer End community, in and through Church of the Good Shepherd. I've been talking to a number of leaders in other parts of the country and seeing how they've done that. My brother, Trevor, he's also a vicar. It runs in the family. He was at Gas Street Church, which is a large church in centre of Birmingham, and took a small team into an amazing fellowship of believers in the outskirts of Birmingham. But actually, they didn't really know how missionally to engage anymore. And so actually with a team of people did what they call a church graft, taking some committed, called Christians to say, we're going to commit to this community of Widmer End. We're going to commit to the Widmer End site of Church of the Good Shepherd and see God break it out in and through there. And so we're entering in a season of planning and preparing for a proper launch in September 2025. And so who will that be? Who will be the people that we believe God is going to raise up? Well, there's 4 circles of people. Number 1, CGS. We'll have members of the congregation of CGS. It's a worshipful, prayerful, beautiful community there. Those will be part of the team that will be thinking, God, how are you shaping us? There'll also be people who are currently in the Manor Farm congregation and the Holy Trinity congregation. Some of those congregations on a Sunday morning have hit capacity. And we believe as we share this over this next 18 months, there'll be people that God starts moving and say, yeah, I believe I need to be called into doing something that's a fresh expression, something that's missional. And we believe that God will actually highlight some people that was actually, we're going to be sent off from Manor Farm, will be sent off from Holy Trinity to do something here at Church of the Good Shepherd. There'll also be another group, that says Widmer End. Whenever we see these things happen in other parts of the country, there'll be people that live geographically near the congregation, and when they see something is moving, something is happening, they will say, I've got a heart for this community, I want to get involved, I want to be part of what God is doing. And so our prayer and preparation will be, God, would you raise up people that are living already in that community? Maybe they're driving 15 miles to a church, but they're saying, no, I want to see something on my estate with my neighbours. And then, because we're not a church that shrinks back, we will believe that there'll be people that will come to faith around Widmer End. And when they come to faith, they'll say, actually, this is a church that I want to be part of, to share my faith with others. That might be people from Creative Cadets. That may be people in the school. We don't know yet. And so out of these 4 groups of people, we believe God will bring about an emerging congregation whose heart is the mission in and around Widmer End, the discipleship of people in and around Widmer End, and serving the people of Widmer End and the surrounding areas. And so over the next few months, we're going to pray, we'll worship together, we're going to continue the normal pattern of worship at Church of the Good Shepherd, and in parallel, we're going to start saying, God, would you raise up people? If you ask me now, what will that church look like? Don't know. If you ask me now, what time will it meet? We don't know. We don't know a lot, but what we do know is God builds his church. We are not those that shrink back. And there'll be those that he is calling and commissioning to be part of a new expression of church. So this is the end of what next. So what are we going to do? We're going to play our part. I'd encourage all of you to say, actually, how can I be used by God? We're going to participate in Gift Day. That's in a couple of weeks' time. We're going to pray for our emerging generations. Please do pray for our 150 young people in the life of this church. And pray as we go through a round of recruitment that God would raise up the right people to serve them. And do begin to seek God for what will be happening over the next few years at our Widmer End site. And so I'm going to invite the worship team to come up.